The scent of scorched minerals and ozone lingered in the Academy's grand dining hall long after the last platter had been cleared. Silver-scaled attendants scurried between towering tables carved from volcanic glass, carrying away uneaten dishes that still sizzled faintly with residual heat. On the dais sat 5 young dragonlings, wings folded neatly, eyes glowing like molten copper. Their plates were untouched. Again. "Third meal rejected," murmured one attendant, keeping his head bowed. They would not even taste the sun-braised marrow. A low growl rolled through the hall. Drakarthun, master of the royal kitchens and bearer of the tidal flame of the 9th furnace, loomed above his trembling staff. "My craft," he hissed, smoke curling from his nostrils, "is the highest form of Drakari art. Hatchlings spitting upon it dishonor the entire culinary lineage." His tail struck the floor with a resonant crack, scattering sparks. From the far end of the hall, a calm voice replied, "Maybe they're not dishonoring it, chef. Maybe they're just not hungry for fire." Every scaled head turned. The speaker, a small figure wrapped in gray utility fatigues, stood unflinching amid the heavy heat. Lieutenant Arya Vega, human nutritional liaison, blinked at the sudden silence. The dragon stared at her as though a moth had dared speak in the presence of thunder. Matron Vena, regal in crimson armor that shimmered like fresh blood, lifted her head from her taloned hand. "Human, this is not your concern. Our young will eat when they understand respect." "With permission, matron," Arya said, stepping forward. "I've watched them push away everything for 6 days. At their age, that's dangerous, no matter the species." Her tone was soft but edged with purpose. "They're not refusing out of defiance. They're reacting." "Reacting?" Drakarthun's voice dropped to a purr that promised destruction. "To perfection?" Arya gestured toward the steaming platters. "Perfection to you, maybe. But food isn't just chemistry. It's communication. You cook with dominance, pride, and competition. That's the energy you pour into every dish. Maybe the kids can taste that." One of the dragonlings, a small one with shimmering violet eyes, tilted her head curiously. "Taste pride," she whispered. The matron's gaze softened briefly before she hid it behind her claws. "Our chefs feed empires, human. Their flames have nurtured warriors for eons." "I'm not doubting that," Arya replied, meeting her eyes. "But they're not warriors yet, they're children. And children don't always need power in their meals. Sometimes they need comfort." The word hung strangely in the air, foreign and fragile. The dragons shifted uneasily, as though the concept itself were unpalatable. Drakarthun let out a harsh laugh, his scales rattling. "Comfort? Do you propose to sing lullabies to soup?" "Something like that," Arya said, crossing her arms. "Let me try feeding them. Just once." Murmurs rippled through the hall. The matron's crest flared slightly, a warning hue of deep red. "A human in the sacred kitchen?" she said, incredulous. "You dare to profane the flame?" "I'm not trying to profane it," Arya said. "I just want to help them eat." Her eyes moved to the younglings. They were watching her intently, torn between curiosity and hunger. "If I fail, you'll have lost nothing but a few minutes. If I succeed..." Drakarthun's laugh faded into a snarl. "If you succeed, it means your kind's soft ways have infected even our young. That will never happen." "Then prove it," she said quietly. The matron raised a claw for silence. For a moment, the only sound was the low hum of the hall's heat vents. Then she spoke, voice sharp and ceremonial. "One attempt. One meal. The young shall taste your human food. If it fails, you are barred from every kitchen on Draconis 7. Arya inclined her head. "Deal." The kitchen was a cathedral of flame and shadow, lined with furnaces that breathed molten light. Drakarthun and his aides stood apart, watching the human prepare her tools, small steel pots, wooden spoons, and a portable stove glowing with a gentle blue flame. To the Drakari, it looked almost pitiful. Arya worked with quiet focus, her movements deliberate. She washed her hands, chopped vegetables with mechanical precision, and let broth simmer until its scent grew rich and deep. The air shifted, less acrid, more inviting. The aromas of herbs and slow-cooked grains replaced the metallic tang of plasma oils. The dragonlings crept closer, their pupils widening. The smallest one tilted her snout toward the steam and whispered, "It smells like when the sun sets." Arya smiled but said nothing, stirring the pot slowly. She poured the soup into bowls designed for claws and placed them gently before the hatchlings. The first spoonful was cautious. Then another. Soon the sound of quiet slurping replaced the tension in the hall. Drakarthun's jaw hung open. "They eat. They like it," one of the attendants whispered. The matron stood, astonishment rippling through her regal composure. "What is this dish called, human?" "Chicken stew," Arya said. "Back home, it's something mothers make when their kids are sick or sad. It doesn't prove strength. It just helps you feel safe again." The violet-eyed dragonling looked up at her, eyes gleaming with warmth. "Safe," she repeated softly, as though testing the shape of the word. The matron's expression flickered, pain, pride, and something almost like gratitude. She lowered her head slightly, the closest a Drakari monarch would ever come to a bow. "You will return tomorrow," she said quietly. "They will require more of this stew." Arya nodded, suppressing the small tremor of relief in her chest. As the younglings licked their bowls clean, the alien chefs stood in stunned silence, their pride cracking like old stone beneath an unfamiliar warmth. When Arya left the kitchen, the air behind her smelled not of burnt minerals but of comfort, a concept that, on this world, had just been born. Outside, beneath the twin suns of Draconis 7, she exhaled and whispered to herself, maybe the secret ingredient really is just being human. Far behind her, Drakarthun watched through the heat-glass window, smoke rising from his nostrils. His claws tightened around his apron's edge, eyes burning with both fury and curiosity. The human had awakened something dangerous and delicious. Morning light filtered through the crystalline windows of the Academy kitchen, painting the metallic counters in soft gold. Arya Vega stood at the central workstation, sleeves rolled up, eyes fixed on a line of alien ingredients that glowed faintly under the lamps. The air was heavy with the scent of ash and steam, and the quiet crackle of flame filled the silence between her heartbeat and the dragon's breath. She hadn't slept much. The memory of the dragonlings' delighted faces after yesterday's meal had carried her through the night, but so had the whispers, the laughter of Drakari chefs who considered her success an accident. Today, she intended to prove it was not. The kitchen staff lingered at a distance, their tails twitching in disapproval. They didn't trust her tools, her small flame, or her unarmored hands. Their eyes followed her every motion as though her touch alone might desecrate the sanctity of their fire. Yet among them stood Drakarthun, his expression carved from molten pride. He had not spoken since the previous evening. Arya could feel the weight of his scrutiny as tangibly as the heat around her. "Back again, human?" His voice slithered through the air like smoke. "Your matron asked me to," she replied evenly, setting a pot on the burner. "She said her children would only eat if I cooked. I couldn't exactly say no." His snarl was soft but sharp. "You mistake indulgence for invitation. The matron's patience is not approval." Arya didn't answer. The pot began to hum gently as she added chopped vegetables and a swirl of golden oil she'd traded for with the supply quartermaster, earth olive oil, something no Drakari palate had ever known. The scent bloomed instantly, floral and alive, cutting through the metallic tang of the kitchen. Several attendants flinched, as though struck by memory. The dragonlings entered then, their claws clicking softly on the tiled floor. They approached without their usual guards, curiosity glowing in their eyes. The smallest, the violet-eyed one, gave a shy wave. "Is it the same food, Miss Arya?" "Not the same," she said, smiling. "Something new, but made the same way." They gathered around the low table as she ladled out steaming portions. This time, she'd made something gentler. Roasted grain bread, soft enough for claws but rich with a toasty aroma, and a stew thickened with roots and light spices. She hummed quietly as she worked, an old human habit that filled the air with a faint melody. Drakarthun frowned. "You make noise while cooking. Why?" It helps me focus, she said, setting down the spoon. And maybe the food listens. Maybe it remembers you were kind to it. A ripple of confusion passed through the gathered dragons. To them, cooking was conquest, heat, force, domination of raw matter. The idea of kindness in the kitchen was as alien as laughter in a battlefield. Arya placed a plate before the nearest hatchling. Go on, try it. The youngling hesitated, then took a bite. A soft rumble escaped its chest, a pleased trill that spread to the others like contagion. Soon they were all eating, tails swaying gently, the sharp ridge of their scales glowing warmer tones. One of the elder attendants gasped. Their biolight is stabilizing, she murmured. That cannot be. Arya leaned against the counter, watching the meat. Where I come from, she said quietly, we believe food carries emotion. You cook with anger, people taste bitterness. You cook with love, they feel safe. Maybe it's not so different here. Drakarthun's eyes narrowed. Superstition. Science, Arya countered. Your species transmits emotional signals through scent and resonance. My food carries chemical traces of empathy, serotonin, oxytocin, things that communicate care. You're not tasting the flavor, you're tasting the feeling. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then the matron herself entered, her massive form dimming the kitchen lights. Her eyes swept over her children, bright and lively now, then fixed on Arya. They eat again. Her voice was quiet, but its weight was immense. You have done what my finest chefs could not. Arya inclined her head. They needed warmth, not strength. Drakarthun stepped forward, lowering himself slightly before the matron. This method, he said reluctantly, lacks discipline. It lacks the artistry of our fire. It cannot, should not, replace our craft. No one's asking it to, Arya said, meeting his gaze. I'm not here to erase your culture. I'm here to help your kids grow into it. That answer silenced even the matron for a moment. The air trembled faintly with her restrained emotion. Perhaps, she said finally, you see what we have forgotten. The violet-eyed hatchling, still licking the last of her stew from the bowl, looked up. Miss Arya, can you teach us to make this? Arya smiled, surprised by the question's innocence. Of course. The children cheered softly, tails flicking in excitement. Even Drakarthun couldn't fully mask his intrigue, though his snort of disdain was purely ceremonial. Teaching dragons to cook with kindness, he muttered. Next you'll tell us to hug our fire. Maybe, Arya said with a grin. You'd be surprised what hugs can fix. The matron's eyes glimmered with something unspoken. Continue your work, human, she said at last. But understand this. The flame of the Drakari must never be diminished. If your methods threaten that balance, even your warmth will not protect you. Arya bowed her head slightly. Understood, matron. When the royal entourage withdrew, the kitchen grew quiet again, save for the gentle bubbling of stew. The dragonlings lingered a few minutes longer, giggling among themselves before returning to lessons. One left a small crystal pebble by Arya's pot, a child's gift of thanks, faintly glowing with inner light. She turned it over in her hand, feeling the smooth pulse beneath her fingers. Somewhere deep inside, pride stirred. Not the cold pride of victory, but something gentler, almost maternal. Humanity's warmth had reached across a gulf of flame and found understanding. Then she felt the weight of Drakarthun's gaze. He stood at the far end of the kitchen, his arms crossed, eyes like twin embers fixed on her. You think you've taught them something new, he said softly. But you've only challenged what they are. Be careful, human. The Drakari flame does not yield easily. Arya met his stare, unflinching. Neither does the human heart. He turned away with a low growl, the sound half amusement, half warning. The kitchen lights dimmed as he left, leaving her alone with the quiet simmer of the broth and the faint, sweet scent of warmth hanging in the air. She didn't know yet that his words were not a threat, but a promise, that soon he would demand a challenge that would set every kitchen on Draconis, 7 ablaze. The great hall of Draconis, 7 trembled under the roar of gathered dragons. Columns of living flame rose along the walls, each marking the presence of a master chef who had come to witness the trial. At the center stood two figures, Dracarthun, towering, his scales gleaming like molten bronze, and Arya Vega, a human barely reaching the height of his chest, standing unarmored beneath the oppressive heat. Word of her success had spread like wildfire through the academy. The hatchling's newfound appetite had been heralded by some as a miracle, by others as heresy. For Dracarthun, it was both a humiliation and a challenge to everything his kind believed sacred. A human had fed dragon children, not with fire, but with gentleness. It was intolerable. Now, beneath the eyes of the matron and the entire Dracari culinary circle, the ancient rite of the trial by flame would decide the truth. "You stand accused of corrupting the royal palate," Dracarthun declared, his voice echoing through the stone. "You dare to defy the flame's purity with your fragile, flavorless ways." Arya kept her tone steady. "I never defied your flame. I just showed it another purpose, to nurture instead of burn." His laugh rumbled like thunder. "A flame that nurtures is one that dies." The matron's claw rose, silencing them both. "Enough," she said, her tone imperial and cold. "You will both prepare a dish before the council. The hatchlings will taste and decide. Let the fire itself reveal which truth endures." Servants cleared the hall, replacing ceremony with purpose. Two massive forges were lit, their light casting crimson shadows across the floor. On one side, Dracarthun's assistants brought out glistening plasma fruits, crystalline salts, and shards of scorched meat from beasts that lived in lava rivers. On the other, Arya set out her modest supplies, local roots, herbs, and a small vial of earth olive oil. She felt the matron's gaze pierce her like sunlight through smoke. "Do you understand what this means, human?" Arya nodded once.
"Yes.
"But I'm not here to win for pride. I'm here to help them eat." The matron said nothing, but her tail flicked once, a flicker of doubt or perhaps approval. At the signal, the duel began. Dracarthun moved like a storm. His claws danced across iron grates, carving and tossing ingredients into flame that roared white-hot. Sparks exploded upward as he infused his dish with volatile energy, chanting old Dracari culinary incantations that made the air hum with power. His food wasn't cooked, it was forged. Arya's space was silent by contrast. She worked with deliberate care, letting the smaller blue flame of her portable stove flicker gently. Her knife cut cleanly through roots and herbs. Her movements were patient, rhythmic. The scents of roasted grain and caramelizing vegetables spread softly, weaving calm through the tension. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some dragons scoffed at the lack of spectacle, but others inhaled deeply, surprised at how the smell stirred something unfamiliar, nostalgia for something they had never known. Dracarthun's dish came together first, slabs of lava beast, meat glazed with plasma sap, surrounded by molten fruit puree. It glowed with lethal beauty, radiating enough heat to make the nearby attendants flinch. Arya finished quietly, ladling her stew into blackstone bowls. The surface shimmered with golden oil and green flecks of spice. Steam rose like breath on a cold morning, carrying a scent that made the hatchlings' tails twitch eagerly. "Present your creations," commanded the matron. Dracarthun strode forward, placing his dish before the children. "Feast on the power of your ancestors," he proclaimed. "Taste the strength that built empires." The hatchlings obeyed. Their eyes glowed as they bit into the meat, and for a moment their scales blazed bright. But then they recoiled slightly, panting. The power was intoxicating but harsh, its flavor overwhelming, its heat unkind. Arya stepped forward next. "This isn't about strength," she said softly. "It's about balance." She handed them the bowls herself. "Eat as much as you want or as little. It's meant to fill you, not challenge you." The young dragons tasted it and silence fell. Their eyes softened, wings relaxing against their backs. A low hum of contentment rippled through them, not of victory or pride, but of peace. The smallest one whispered, "It feels warm inside." Dracarthun's nostrils flared. "Trickery," he spat. "You use chemistry, sedatives, pheromones." Arya shook her head. No tricks. Just empathy. The difference between feeding and caring. The matron descended from her seat, her claws clicking softly against the stone. She studied both dishes, then turned to the hatchlings. You have tasted both. Which do you choose? The younglings looked at each other, then bowed their heads toward Arya. The human flame, said the violet-eyed one, voice trembling with conviction. It doesn't hurt. A murmur of astonishment swept the hall. Drakar Thun's claws dug into the ground, leaving cracks in the obsidian floor. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he inhaled deeply and exhaled a ribbon of smoke that smelled of resignation and awe. You've done what I could not, he admitted quietly. You've made the flame gentle, and still made it burn. Arya lowered her head in respect. Maybe the flame was never meant to be cruel. Maybe it just needed to remember why it burns. The matron turned toward the gathered chefs. From this day, she declared, the art of flame shall evolve. The humans' methods will join ours. Let the fire of pride and the warmth of care burn together. Cheers and growls mingled in the hall, half celebration, half rebellion. But the decision was made. Arya had not only won, she had changed the very meaning of their craft. As the hall emptied, Drakar Thun lingered beside her. His expression was unreadable, pride and confusion warring behind his eyes. Your victory will haunt us, he said at last. But perhaps it will also feed us. I'll take that as a compliment, Arya replied with a tired smile. He huffed smoke in amusement. You wield no claws, no fire, yet you've outshone dragons. Be careful, human. Some flames are jealous. She met his gaze. And some flames learn to share. He said nothing more. The embers dimmed, leaving her alone with the scent of broth and burned ozone, and the faint, lingering warmth of a world beginning to change. The trial was over, but something deeper had only just begun. The twin suns hung low over Draconis 7, their amber light diffused through the translucent domes of the Royal Academy. The air shimmered with the heat of preparation, though this time, it was not the sharp, aggressive warmth of the Drakari forges. It was something gentler, inviting. Inside the grand hall, the old furnaces burned beside new stoves, blue flames dancing beside gold. For the first time in Drakari history, two fires coexisted without rivalry. Arya Vega moved between them with quiet grace, a towel slung over her shoulder, her hands dusted with flour. Around her bustled young dragonlings and apprentices of both species, their motions unsteady but earnest. The scent of baked grain and molten spice hung heavy in the air. Every clang of utensils, every burst of laughter, felt like an echo of something larger, a species learning to breathe together. Gentler, Arya murmured to a youngling who was stirring too fast. Cooking isn't a race, it's a rhythm. The dragonling blinked, slowing its claw. But our songs of flames speak of conquest. Then maybe it's time to write new verses, she said, smiling. Across the hall, Drakar Thun observed in silence, his once pristine armor replaced by a simple cooking vest. He moved differently now, not with the swagger of an untouchable master, but with the careful steps of one learning anew. His claws handled utensils instead of weapons, and though his pride still burned bright, it had softened around the edges. You're teaching them to hesitate, he grumbled as Arya passed him, though there was no heat in his tone. I'm teaching them to taste, she replied, nodding toward the steaming dishes before them. And you're helping. He gave a short snort of acknowledgement. Against my better judgment, the Feast of Unity was to begin at dusk, and the matron herself would preside. For weeks, rumors had spread across the empire, stories of a human who tamed dragons with flavor and a chef who turned arrogance into art. Many had come to see if those tales were true. As the final preparations neared completion, the matron entered, her massive form filling the doorway with scarlet light. Her wings were folded like banners, her scales polished to a ceremonial sheen. The hall bowed as she approached, her gaze sweeping over the array of dishes. So this is the union of flame and flesh, she said softly, almost to herself. Arya bowed, wiping her hands. It's not perfect, but it's ours. Thun inclined his head. The fire tempered, the heart awakened. Together, they make something stronger. The matron's expression softened, the faintest trace of a smile ghosting across her lips. Then let it be served. Plates and bowls were carried forth by dragons and humans alike, arranged on long obsidian tables. The food shimmered, crimson-glazed roots beside golden bread, glowing fruit stews balanced with earthy grain loaves. Each dish carried traces of both worlds, molten sweetness and grounded simplicity. The aroma filled the hall with a harmony that needed no translation. The matron raised a single claw, signaling silence. Today, we feast not as species, but as kin, she declared. Let this meal mark the birth of a new fire, one that warms, not burns. At her command, the hall erupted into motion. Claws and hands reached for plates, laughter rising like music. The dragonlings chattered with their human counterparts, comparing tastes, arguing over spice, daring each other to try more. Even the oldest of the Drakari chefs sampled human bread with cautious reverence. Arya took a seat at the edge of the hall, watching the scene unfold with quiet disbelief. She had seen wars waged over less than this, a simple act of sharing. Now, creatures who once defined themselves through conquest were discovering that gentleness could be powerful too. Thun joined her, setting down 2 bowls of stew. You've undone centuries of pride in a month, he said. And somehow I'm not angry. That might be the seasoning talking, Arya replied. He chuckled, a deep rumble that made the nearby candles tremble.
No.
It's understanding. I thought strength came from domination, but your kind taught me something inconvenient. She raised an eyebrow. Which is? That fire without purpose is just destruction. But purpose without fire is just sentiment. Arya smiled. Then we balance each other. He looked down at his bowl. Balance, yes. That's a flavor I could get used to. The matron approached them then, her massive form casting a shadow that stretched across the hall. Lieutenant Vega, she said formally, the council has decided. You will remain as cultural advisor to the academy. Your flame will burn beside ours. Arya stood, bowing slightly. I'm honored, matron. Truly. The matron's eyes softened. You have given my children more than food. You have given them the knowledge that care is not weakness. Remember that your flame, small as it seems, has changed the course of dragons. Arya's throat tightened, and she simply nodded. As the Feast of Unity reached its height, the hatchlings climbed onto the central table, singing a rough but spirited tune, half Drakari war chant, half Earth lullaby. The harmony was imperfect, but beautiful in its defiance of tradition. Even Thun joined the refrain, his deep voice blending with the children's. Outside the domes, the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting the world in a tranquil glow. The fires inside the hall burned on, some red, some blue, but all the same warmth. Arya stood quietly for a long while, feeling the pulse of laughter and life around her. She thought of Earth, of home, and realized that perhaps humanity's greatest gift was never technology or power. It was empathy, the ability to see the sacred in something as simple as a shared meal. Thun turned toward her. You've changed us, human. But tell me, what will you do now? Arya looked over the room, at dragons teaching other dragons to knead dough, at hatchlings passing bread to humans twice their size. Now, she said softly, now I make sure this warmth doesn't fade. A slow smile spread across his face. Then perhaps, Lieutenant Vega, you are not just a cook. You are a keeper of flame. She laughed quietly. Maybe so. And as the feast continued deep into the night, the sound of shared laughter and the scent of harmony rose together into the sky, proof that sometimes the fiercest fire begins not with power, but with kindness.